Jane Eyre, Chapter 7, Part 2. Mr. Brocklehurst again paused, perhaps overcome by his feelings. Miss Temple had looked down when he first began to speak to her, but she now gazed straight forward, and her face, naturally pale as marble, appeared to be assuming also the coldness and fixity of that material. Especially her mouth, closed as if it would have required a sculptor's chisel to open it, and her brow settled gradually into petrified severity. Meantime, Mr. Brocklehurst, standing on the hearth with his hands behind his back, majestically surveyed the whole school. Suddenly his eye gave a blink as if it had met something that either dazzled or shocked its pupil. Turning, he said in a more rapid accent than he had hitherto used, Miss Temple, what is that girl with curled hair? Red hair, ma'am? Curled? Curled all over?" And extending his cane, he pointed to the awful object, his hand shaking as he did so. "It is Julia Severn," replied Miss Temple very quietly. "Julia Severn, ma'am, and why has she or any other child curled hair? Why, in defiance of every precept and principle of this house, does conform to the world so openly here in an evangelical charitable establishment as to wear her hair one mass of curls?" "Julia's hair curls naturally," returned Miss Temple, still more quietly. "Naturally? Yes, but we are not to conform to nature. I wish these girls to be the children of grace. And why that abundance? I have again and again intimated that I desire the hair to be arranged closely, modestly, plainly. Miss Temple, that girl's hair must be cut off entirely. I will send a barber tomorrow, and I see others who have far too much of this excrescence. That tall girl, tell her to turn round. Tell all the first form to rise up and direct their faces to the wall." Miss Temple passed her handkerchief over her lips as if to smooth away the involuntary smile that curled them. She gave the order, however, and when the first class could take in what was required of them, they obeyed. Leaning a little back on my bench, I could see the looks and grimaces with which they commented on this maneuver. It was a pity Mr. Brocklehurst could not see them too. He would perhaps have felt that whatever he might do with the outside of the cup and platter, the inside was further beyond this interference than he imagined. He scrutinized the reverse of these living metals for, some 5 minutes, then produced sentence. These words fell like the knell of doom. "All those top knots must be cut off." Miss Temple seemed to remonstrate. "Madam," he pursued, "I have a master to serve whose kingdom is not of this world. My mission is to mortify in these girls the lusts of the flesh, to teach them to clothe themselves with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with braided hair and costly apparel, and each of these young persons before us has a string of hair twisted in plaits which vanity itself might have woven. These, I repeat, must be cut off. Think of the time wasted of—" Mr. Brocklehurst was here interrupted. 3 other visitors, ladies, now entered the room. They ought to have come a little sooner to have heard his lecture on dress, for they were splendidly attired in velvet, silk, and furs. The 2 younger of the trio, fine girls of 16 and 17, had gray beaver hats then in fashion, shaded with ostrich plumes, and from under the brim of this graceful headdress fell a profusion of light tresses, elaborately curled. The elderly lady was enveloped in a costly velvet shawl trimmed with ermine, and she wore a false front of French curls. These ladies were deferentially received by Miss Temple as Mrs. and Mrs. Brocklehurst, and conducted to seats of honor at the top of the room. It seems they have come to the carriage with the reverend relative, and had been conducting a rummaging scrutiny of the rooms upstairs, while he transacted business with the housekeeper, questioned the laundress, and lectured the superintendent. They now proceeded to address diverse remarks and reproofs to Miss Smith, who was charged with the care of the linen and the inspection of the dormitories, but I had no time to listen to what they said. Other matters called off and enchained my attention. Hitherto, while gathering up the discourse of Mr. Brocklehurst and Miss Temple, I had not at the same time neglected precautions to secure my personal safety, which I thought would be effected if I could only elude observation. To this end I had set well back at form, and while seeming to be busy with my sum, had held my slate in such a manner as to conceal my face. I might have escaped notice had not my treacherous slate somehow happened to slip from my hand, and, falling with an obtrusive crash, directly drawn every eye upon me. I knew it was all over now, and as I stooped to pick up the 2 fragments of slate, I rallied my forces for the worst. It came. "A careless girl," said Mr. Brocklehurst, and immediately after, "It was this new pupil, I perceive. And before I could draw breath, I must not forget I have a word to say respecting her." Then aloud, how loud it seemed to me, "Let the child who broke her slate come forward." Of my own accord, I could not have stirred. I was paralyzed, but the 2 great girls who sat on each side of me set me on my legs and pushed me towards the dread judge, and then Miss Temple gently assisted me to her very feet, and I caught her whispered counsel. "Don't be afraid, Jane. I saw it was an accident. You shall not be punished." The kind whisper went to my heart like a dagger. Another minute, and she will despise me for a hypocrite, thought I, and an impulse of fury against Reeve, Brocklehurst and Company bounded in my pulses at the conviction. I was no Helen Burns. Fetch that stool, said Mr. Brocklehurst, pointing to a very high one from which a monitor had just risen. It was brought. Place the child upon it. And I was placed there by whom I don't know. I was in no condition to note particulars. I was only aware that they had hoisted me up to the height of Mr. Brocklehurst's nose, that he was within a yard of me, and that a spread of shot orange and purple silk pelisses and a cloud of silvery plumage extended and waved below me. Mr. Brocklehurst hemmed. Ladies, said he, turning to his family, Miss Temple, teachers and children, you all see this girl. Of course they did, for I felt their eyes directed like burning glasses against my scorched skin. You see she is yet young. You observe she possesses the ordinary form of childhood. God has graciously given her that shape that he has given to all of us. No signal deformity points her out as marked character. Who would think that the evil one has already found a servant and an agent in her? Yet such, I grieve to say, is the case. A pause in which I began to steady the palsy of my nerves and to feel that the Rubicon had passed, and that the trial no longer to be shirked must be firmly sustained. My dear children, pursued the black marble clergyman with pathos, this is a sad, a melancholy occasion, for it becomes my duty to warn you that this girl, who might be one of God's own lambs, is a little castaway, not a member of the true flock, but evidently an interloper and an alien. You must be on your guard against her. You must shun her example. If necessary, avoid her company, exclude her from your sports, and shut her out of your converse. Teachers, you must watch her, keep your eyes on her movements, weigh well her words, scrutinize her actions, punish her body to save her soul, if indeed such salvation be possible, for... My tongue falters while I tell it. This girl, this child, the native of a Christian land, worse than many a little heathen who says its prayers to Brahma and kneels before a juggernaut, this girl is a liar. Now came a pause of 10 minutes, during which I, by this time in perfect possession of my wits, observed all the female Brocklehursts produce their pocket handkerchiefs and apply them to their optics, while the elderly lady swayed herself to and fro, and the two younger ones whispered, How shocking! Mr. Brocklehurst resumed, This I learned from her benefactress, from the pious and charitable lady who adopted her in her orphan state, reared her as her own daughter, and whose kindness, whose generosity the unhappy girl repaid by an ingratitude so bad, so dreadful, that at the last excellent, the patroness was obliged to separate her from her own young ones, fearful lest her vicious example should contaminate their purity. She has sent her back here to be healed, even as the Jews of old sent the disease to the troubled pool of Bethesda. And teachers, superintendent, I beg of you not to allow the waters to stagnate around her. With a sublime conclusion, Mr. Brocklehurst adjusted the top button of his stirrup, muttered something to his family, who rose, bowed to Miss Temple, and then all the great people sailed into the stateroom. Turning at the door, that my judge said, Let her stand half an hour longer on that stool, and let no one speak to her during the remainder of the day. There was I, then mounted aloft. I, who had said that I could not bear the shame of standing on that natural feet in the middle of the room, was now exposed to general view on a pedestal of infamy. What my sensations were no language can describe, but just as they all arose, stifling my breath and contracting my throat, a girl came up and passed me. In passing, she lifted her eyes. What a strange light inspired them. What an extraordinary sensation that ray sent through me. How the new feeling bore me up. It was as if I were a martyr, a hero, had passed a slave or victim and imparted strength in the transit. I mastered the rising hysteria, lifted up my head, and took a firm stand on the stool. Helen Burns asked some slight question about her work of Miss Smith, was chidden for the triviality of the inquiry, and returned to her place and smiled at me as she again went by. What a smile. I remember it now, and I know that it was the affluence of a fine intellect, of true courage. It lit up her marked lineaments, then her thin face, her sunken gray eye like a reflection from the aspect of an angel. Yet at that moment Helen Burns wore on her arm the untidy badge. Scarcely an hour ago I had heard her condemned by Miss Scatcherd to a dinner of bread and water on the morrow because she had blotted an exercise in copying it out. Such is the imperfect nature of man. Such spots are there on the disk of the clearest planet, and eyes like Miss Scatcherd's can only see those minute defects that are blind to the full brightness of the orb.